So this is Baruch, and what you see over here is a drawing which we're going to get into. It comes from the book Jewish Astrology, the Cosmic Science. If I forget, I think a little bit of what he called the beginning. This is the basic model of the universe. And at first, he went through the basic model of the Gentile world. And let me see if do we have a drawing of that? Not necessarily, but he did talk about that, where the earth is the center of all things. Now, we're not going to try to get into the different kind of discussions that you have in astrology and astronomy about where the positions of the planets are today. Instead, we're going to come over here and we're going to talk about Jewish astrology is much more detailed about the energy that come down from all parts of heaven to earth. Now, he's talking about, if you're familiar with the Ari a little bit, then you understand that the Ari deals with all the energy that is inside of everything. That's the Ein Sof within. Here we're talking about the Ein Sof without, on the outside, and shining down. So whatever that shining is, there are plenty of metaphors for it, but this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing from the outside, and how the force and the energy of the Ein Sof from the outside penetrates to us. Interestingly, Maimonides describes how people in ancient times came to worship idols. They just woke up every morning and saw the sun, moon, stars, etc. They didn't realize there was anything above that. So they concluded that those were the sources of power. An interesting question is, how did astrology develop the way it did throughout the ancient world? It's a fact that the symbols of astrology are very similar around the world, with the same constellations and planets. So one may ask how all those countries picked up all those constellations to be used in astrology. He said because the zodiac, that's the signs, are not so easy to standardize globally, and yet they're all the same all over the world. How did all the nations all learn to connect the stars in the same way? There's no real compulsion to do so, so where did it all start from? Did it start in Babylon? Did the Babylonians draw the imaginative lines which were picked up and then spread over the whole world? How did everyone agree, for example, on, let's say, like 7 days a week, 7 days in the week, or 7-day weeks? There's no place in the world where the week is different than 7 days. So there must have been an original source which originated it and spread out from there to the whole world. So Rabbi Yaakov continues, so the ancient people must have studied astrology, tried one system which didn't work, and moved to another until they found a suitable one, which in most cases involved the planets. So people started worshipping planets and stars and wanted to change their luck. So this is the way idol worship began. In India, for instance, people believe, even today, that one who's trouble in his life, for example, because of a bad Saturn planet influence, has to pray to Saturn, say a special mantra to him, a number of specific times, specific words, and to ask him not to be mean. He said not to be so mean. And in Western astrology, Greek, Roman, in the time of idol worship, they would make offerings and build idols for the planets and so on, and this is how idol worship developed. The founder of Judaism is Avraham Avinu, Abraham. He was born in the year 1948 in the ancient Jewish calendar. It is easy to remember this because the state of Israel was formed in 1948 of the Common Era. So this means he was born about 4,000 years ago. He was born some 1,700 years before the Common Era. He was an astrologer, the astrologer of his generation. And kings from all over the world came to learn from him, which was unusual. And he wrote a book, the book called the Sefirot, the Book of Formation, which is the oldest book that talks about astrology, and which has 6 chapters, at least 2 of which are almost totally devoted to astrology. The Talmud discusses how Avraham Avinu, that's Abraham, discovered God at a young age, for he was the first monotheist and the founder of monotheism. And he came to the idea of monotheism by watching the planets and stars and their movements and impacts, and realizing that they couldn't do it by themselves. Something had to start it. So there must be someone who guides them And so he came to the belief in one God. So one may ask, if God is running the world, why do we need all this Kabbalah system? Why are energies not sent directly from him to us? This is an important question which we will discuss later, and it's fundamental to understanding the principles and depth of Kabbalah and its subsection of astrology. So it is interesting to know that the evolution of Judaism was started by the astrologer of his generation, Abraham. And he concluded that the stars and the planets couldn't do the jobs by themselves, but rather there had to be something higher which made them work. We also need to know that in the world of Asiya, which is the world of action, Olam was called Olam Asiya in Hebrew, there are 10 sefirot, and the worlds are like a hologram. So each component part has all 10 spheres are sefirot. That's what he's doing. So the question about what spheros means is the subject to different, some people say it's like a sapphire. So, as other people say, well, you see that it's a sphere. So the palace of Rakia. So we talked about this palace is in the Olam, of which is called the Olam, or anyway, which is the second palace, the palace of the world of Asiya. There are 10 spheros. The palace of Rakia corresponds to the spheres of Yesod in Asiya. And there are 10 spheros in the palace of Rakia. The 10 are made of 7 planets. So how do you get 10 out of 7? Well, there's some double counting. So the first stars, that is the Hagagal Hayomi, which we mentioned that before, which is the daily sphere, and the Gagal Seichel, the spheres of intelligence, those are the 10 energies in all. So you have 7, and then you have these others that are on top of that. So he says, now let's look at the Rakia. Going on. The 10th sefirah, which is called the Gagal Seichel, the sphere of intelligence, is not usually discussed, and it corresponds to the 10th sefirot, which is called Keter, and corresponds to the 10th sphere, the highest in the Rakia, and the sphere of Keter, is where all the energies come through and into the rest of existence. Now this is what he's saying here in this drawing, is we go from Keter to Chochmah, to Bina, to Chesed, to Gevurah, to Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchut. If you count them up, they're 10. So he says Keter is the wheel of higher insight. These are all wheels, as we understand it's implied that they're moving. Chochmah is the next one. It's the daily wheel. That's also the 9th sphere, the word that he was counting. Bina represents the fixed stars. Chesed is Saturn. Interesting, that Saturn is the pale planet, the dark cold planet. Gevurah is Jupiter. Tiferet is the sun. Netzach is Mars. Hod is Venus. Yesod is Mercury. And then finally you come back to Malchut, the moon, the inner circle, which is the object of God's affection, is to bring the light through all of this pattern into us. Now, we could do just a little bit more. The 9th sphere of the 10 spheres in Kabbalah is called Chochmah, and it corresponds to the 9th sphera in Rakia. So the Galgal Hayomi, the daily sphere, where it revolves from east to west in one day, it goes from the east to the west in one day. Observe how all planets go from west to east. He says they go from west to east. They're moving from the west to east. I never really follow the planets, so I'm just learning. He said, but due to their movement inside the daily sphere, all planets seem as if they're going from east to west. Now, that's a flat fact that I can't argue with. That he says that there is such a thing as the Gagal Hayomi. That's a daily wheel, which is Chochmah. And the daily sphere would have revolves from east to west in one day. That means it comes up with the sun, and it goes down with the sun, at east to west. But on the other hand, that he says actually, observe how all the planets go from west to east, but actually in relationship to the Earth, the planets, I guess he means to say, the solar system is moving counterclockwise. which is interesting because that's actually, I'm just learning this, is actually, that's how a birth chart reads. It reads from left to right. In other words, in a circle, but starting to go from the, well, it's going, what is it? Counterclockwise. That's the right way to say it. Observe how all planets go from west to east, but due to their movement inside the daily sphere, all planets seem as if they are going from east to west. Now, that can't argue. The ninth sphere of Chokhmah, wisdom, which is similar but different to Keter, which is a crown, and it sits above the person. It is made of the upper aspect of the lower world and the lower aspect of the upper world. Now, get this. What does he mean? The lower aspect, Keter sits between worlds. It is an actually aspect, and if we looked at it in terms of Zeranpin, of the letter Vav, it's actually an aspect of the letter He, which comes above the Vav. So it comes first. So it's actually an aspect of there. So therefore, that's why it's really the bottom of the upper world and the top of the lower world, where energy comes from and goes back. So the energy all is really disseminated from this place and goes back to it. The first thing we say about Chokhmah, wisdom, is that all were created from it. Kulam b'Chokhmah siso. So that's it. Everything was made in Chokhmah, and it is Chokhmah is usually running the whole system. It is also called the white sphere, for there's nothing in it for us to see. Wisdom is like the beginning, like a male, and like the child starts being seen in his mother, but his father is not known. He says this is an interesting idea. Read it again. It's like the situation between a husband and a wife in regards to their children. Wisdom is like the beginning, like a male. And like the child, so in other words, you have to have a male to have a child. And like the child starts being seen in his mother, but his father is not known in the same certainty. So the child can see his mother. He knows his mother nurses him, he knows. But the father is abstract. As his mother, so does the visibility of what comes down from up above only starts to appear in the next sphere, which is the female sphere called Bina. In the place of Rakia, it is the A sphere, the sphere of the fixed stars, which resembles the mother. Now, in words that we use when we describe this Kabbalah here that he's explaining, is we say that the physicality is only manifest in the mother. Just like the seed of the father goes inside of the mother, you don't ever see the seed, but you do see the mother's belly swell. So that's what it is, and we'll go to more. It's a little bit more difficult, this little piece, a little bit more to think about. This is Baruch Fleischman.